He's a great player. He's having an MVP season, and he's going to hit 60 home runs. I just don't know how the Yankees are going to get away not giving him $300 million, and if they don't, somebody else is.
Tim Kurkjian, of course, Hall of Famer, covers baseball for ESPN. Tim, how you doing this week?
I'm doing well, Buster. How's it going?
I'm doing okay up here at the family farm in Vermont. Hey, I just want to say thank you for your commitment to the podcast. We got this great Bleacher tweet from PK Steinberg, who's a regular listener. And he asked, Buster, will you and Tim please shave lightning bolts in your hair if the Cardinals win the World Series? And after, I got that, it was in the midst of the Sunday night game. I absolutely responded immediately, and I committed you and your son, Jeff, to doing this together, having lightning bolts in honor of, I felt like Adam Wainwright and his son, who asked him to shave a lightning bolt. So I essentially said, yes, Tim will do this.
Well, I'm not sure I have enough hair to do this. As you can see, clearly my forehead has become a 5-head. My son, Jeff, is in for everything. He's 29 years old. All 29-year-olds are up for anything. But yes, I will shave a lightning bolt into my hair. Of course, there's not much there. I'm not sure there's going to be room. And I've got an on-deck circle on the top of my head, a bald spot up there. So we'll have to be careful how we shave, okay?
See, I did not get the reaction from you that I expected. I thought you'd basically be like, what are you doing committing me? And what happened to you in this whole event? But maybe the fact that Jeff jumped in yesterday on Twitter said, yeah, I'm up for it. Maybe that moved you along?
Well, if my son asked me to do anything, then the answer is yes, because that's what parents do for their children. I danced on national TV with JoJo Siwa because my son asked me to do it. It was the single most embarrassing thing my entire life. But because my son asked me to do it, I did it. So if he's in, I'm in.
Yeah, Taylor, you got it on the record, right? Cardinals win the World Series. What's going to happen?
Oh yeah, we're pulling this for sure. This is going nowhere. I'm gonna put this on a separate hard drive so we don't lose it.
All right. Last night, Tim, Aaron Judge hit home run number 50. How much money is he going to make this winter?
Well, I think it's going to start with a 3 now, Buster. I'm not sure there's a way around that. He turned down, what was it, 7 years, 208, whatever.
Yeah, 7 years, $213.5 million, $30.5 million a year.
Right. So I think it's going to start with a 3, and I think it's going to be deserved, because even though he's going to be 30 years old, he's a great player. He's having an MVP season, and he's going to hit 60 home runs. I just don't know how the Yankees are going to get away not giving him $300 million. And if they don't, somebody else is, because he's not only great, he's getting better, and he's as good a kid as you'll find in the big leagues. So I think add all that together, I think he gets a ton of money. Again, Buster, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Aaron Judge, the only 3 Yankees ever to have 2 50 home run seasons. They've been playing for a long time with a lot of great players. It's pretty impressive what he's done.
Okay, if the Yankees sign him to a contract that starts with the number 3, that would represent a complete surrender in the negotiations, which is not without precedent in the Yankees' history. In the fall of 1998, Bernie Williams became a free agent. And the Yankees had offered him $60 million, and he went out in the open market. The Diamondbacks were talking about a significant contract. Then he went and talked with the Red Sox, and he sat down with George Steinbrenner, and he said, you know what? There have been times when I felt like you doubted me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but here are these offers that I've received, and that tells you this is what I'm really worth. And after that moment, as Bernie drove away from the Yankees complex down in Tampa, with his agent, Scott Boras, his phone rang, and it was George Steinbrenner saying, I'll pay you, essentially. And he wound up getting $87.5 million after the Yankees had stood on a $60 million offer for months. So if the Yankees sign him, that's got to happen. Yes, it's got to be a complete and utter surrender and essentially an acknowledgement that they were wrong with the offer in the spring.
Yeah, surrender is a good word, Buster. And help me here because you covered the team then. Bernie was in line potentially to go to the Red Sox, right? And I think George said, we're not letting him go to the Red Sox. So if Aaron Judge potentially, we're making all this up, could end up with the Mets or another contending team against the Yankees, how could the Yankees say no? I'm not suggesting it's going to happen, but you're right. It will take a complete surrender by the Yankees. But if you're going to surrender to anyone, I think Aaron Judge is one to surrender to, given how well he's played this year. I think where his career is still headed, and what a great kid he is.
Yeah, and he's proven himself in a big market. Marley Rivera tweeted this out after the game last night, which the Yankees lost to the Angels. Judge was asked about what he thinks about when he looks at the 2022 season with 50 home runs. He said, I'll be thinking about a 4-3 loss. That's what I'll be thinking about. And that might feel a little bit fake unless you know Aaron Judge. Yes, Tim?
Yes, I agree. When he said 50 is just another number, it is just another number last night in a loss. I mean, this reminds me of Mark McGwire during the 62 chase and everything else. I mean, I was around that all the time. And he was really uncomfortable talking about chasing any sort of record while the Cardinals kept losing games, which they lost a lot of games that year, Judge in a different position. But it's a whole different thing. It's hard to stand in front of your locker and talk about some sort of record when your team just lost a game, several games now in a row. So I'm with Judge. That's real when he says that.
Okay, this is the first show since Julio Rodriguez got his massive extension from the Seattle Mariners the other day with all the twists and turns and the opt-ins, opt-outs, which could make it worth up to $470 million. It's worth at least $210 million. What did you make of all that?
Well, I think it's great for Julio Rodriguez because he's had, 4 months in the big leagues and now he's getting paid an enormous amount. He's guaranteed over $200 million. Look, Buster, I'm all for this. This is what the Braves have done. These things work for the most part. It does worry me a tiny bit that I used to love baseball. Well, I used to love that baseball was the one sport where you really had to prove yourself, probably for 6 years before you really get paid. And now we're paying guys after 6 months, or in this case, after 4 months. So there is a concern there. However, you look at this kid whose poise is ridiculously high for someone this young. He's 21. He won't be 22 till December. He's the fourth youngest player in the major leagues. He has tremendous power. He's a 2020 guy already. And you put everything together and the Mariners look at it and say, we can't let this guy go. And he's going to crush us in arbitration for the next 5 years. So why don't we pay him now? I think it's great for Rodriguez. I think it's great for the Mariners. The only danger is we were saying the exact same thing when Fernando Tatis Jr. got his huge deal. And at least early on, it hasn't gone the way the Padres had wanted.
Yeah, I'll retell the story from the home run derby that Julio Rodriguez participated in, caught all of our attention with his performance there. Mookie Betts was carrying his daughter behind home plate, and he stepped forward and said something to Julio Rodriguez, and then he told me right after that, hey, I told him to keep it going. And then Mookie looked at me with the biggest eyes and said, it's the first time I've ever seen him in person. Oh, my God. So if you can impress Mookie Betts, that's saying something about you. Speaking of the Dodgers, Tony Gonsolin has a strained forearm. He goes to the injured list. The Dodgers are playing at a pace. I tweeted this out this morning that if you look at what they've done since June 21st, since then, their win pace would be at about 128 over the course of a full 162 game season. They're killing the ball. They're killing other teams. They're racking up tons of runs. Their run differential within the next week might be over 300. But Tim, they've got a lot of these injuries. Their pitching staff getting piled up. What's your take on this injury?
Well, first off with the Dodgers, you're right. 21-5 in August. Buster, they're 51 games over 500. I always remember Earl Weaver pulling out of on the bus coming out of Kansas City, late 70s, September game that they lost. and he growls to no one in particular on the bus. He said, "Damn, it's hard to stay 50 games over 500. That's how unlikely it is to be where the Dodgers are. But to answer your question, yes, it's a concern. Walker Buehler is out for the season. Tony Gonsolin is 16-1, and he's hurt, and it's a forearm. It's a terrible word when you get an injured pitcher using that part of his body. I still think they're great. I think they'll be the best team in baseball when they enter October, but we know it's going to be an all-time grind to get through that month with a late start, a late finish, more games, everything. They're going to need as much, every team's going to need as much starting pitching as possible. And the Dodgers likely might end up in October with diminished starting pitching because of all these injuries.
Yeah, and I think when we turn in our power rankings later today at ESPN.com, you and I will both have the Dodgers at number one. They've earned it with how they've dominated. But the question going into the postseason is who is going to potentially knock them off on the World Series. And this person looked at me and said, I totally agree with you. And then the Cardinals, I think with the addition of Jordan Montgomery, the great defense, the fact that they're getting, I think some of their position players settling it out, Tyler O'Neill, maybe bouncing back from some injuries. I think they're a really dangerous team. You agree with me or no?
Yeah, I said on Baseball Tonight on Sunday, I think the Braves are better than they were at this time last year. Spencer Strider adds another element. So does Michael Harris II. I mean, they are really, really good. And the Cardinals.
And Ronald Acuna Jr. back.
Right. He's going to be back there in October as opposed to last year. And I love where the Cardinals are. Jack Flaherty's got one more rehab start. There's no pitch limit on him. Let's say he comes back as the Jack Flaherty that we know, and he's a number one starting pitcher in the postseason. I mean, how do you not love the Cardinals if all of that works out, especially with the guys at the corners? And you mentioned Tyler O'Neill. He was so important to them last year, and only recently has he gotten it going. So I love where the Cardinals are. Mets, Cardinals, Braves, Dodgers, those are just four teams in the National League who could win the World Series with the team they have right now. I repeat, the National League playoffs is going to be one of the great spectacles ever.
You love baseball. That's pretty well established on this podcast. And I wanted to get your response to what we saw leading up to the game on Sunday night. Adam Wainwright talking with David Cohn as he went through his pregame regimen. What was your takeaway from that?
Well, Adam Wainwright's better than all of us on television, okay? I would mic him up for his entire life. He has made me laugh so many different times, and yet he has also taught me so much about the game when you just talk to him about pitching. You know, he plants vegetables, he makes his own iced tea, he's like a great cook, he can really sing. He's a father of daughters, he's great at it. I mean, there's nothing he can't do, but it was so good to see two pitchers speaking the same language and doing what they did. David Cohn was tremendous, but Wainwright was even better just because he was saying, what did he say? I have to put on my dastardly face or something because I don't want the Braves to see me laughing on the field before a game starts. Buster, how many pitchers have we met in our time who you can't even say hello to on the day they're pitching? All right. Kurkjian, I can list about 20. Scott Erickson, you're not allowed to go near it.
Justin Verlander's number one, I think.
Right. And here is Adam Wainwright at age 41, whatever he is today, walking around, joking around with a microphone on a few minutes before he starts a major league game. I think that speaks to exactly who Adam Wainwright is and why he's been so good for so long.
Yeah, totally comfortable in his own skin. And boy, what a treat for all of us. And I think you'll be really shocked about this, knowing Eduardo Perez and how selfish he is, Tim. This was his idea, from what I understand. It was brought up in a conference call last week. His idea, hey, let's talk to Waino. He talked to Adam on Saturday about the possibility. And as it played out, the only two voices you heard were Wainwright and David Cohn, because Eduardo Perez knew that a conversation between two starting pitchers would be the most effective way to do that on television. Eduardo giving Coney the big stage.
Well, this is why Eduardo is one of my all-time best friends, because it's never about him. And he has this way, Buster, where he just acts like he's been there before. So he goes to Adam Wainwright without even thinking twice and saying, "Hey, I think you should do this." And Adam Wainwright said, "Yes, we should." But again, Eduardo recognized this is a pitcher to pitcher conversation. This would be difficult if it would be different. Sorry, if this were Albert Pujols speaking before the game mic'd up. That's where Eduardo would be asking all the questions, and I'm sure David Cohn would take a step backwards. But that's who Eduardo is. He's America's guest. He's an all-timer in every way.
Coming up on the podcast, you can hear that conversation replayed in its entirety between Adam Wainwright and David Cohn. Tim, this got my attention yesterday. Sam Kennedy, who's the president of the Red Sox, the Red Sox had tremendous success under Sam's direction, spoke with The Athletic and said to them that, he's comfortable in saying that both Chaim Bloom and Alex Cora will be back in their respective roles for 2023. The fact that he felt the need to address that, I think, tells you a lot about the chatter that's going on around baseball about what's going on with the Red Sox.
Yeah, and I believe Sam Kennedy, everything he says, so I'm going to take him at his word here, but I'm not so sure this is the perfect marriage, general manager and manager. And I'm not positive that both of those guys are going to be back next year, mainly because of how poorly things have gone, especially lately in Boston. Look, Alex Cora is a great manager. He should be the manager of that team next year. But to me, they're just, help me, Buster, they're just divergent, personalities, and they're looking in different directions from what I can see. So they're going to have to really get it together if they're going to make those two work together. Chaim Bloom's really smart. Alex Cora is a great manager. And if he doesn't come back to Boston, and I'm not suggesting he's not going back, he would get a job very quickly.
To me, the standard, Tim, is the question of whether or not they're doing everything they can to win. Because Alex, that's ever since all the time I've known him, that's what he wants to do. Would you agree with me? Like, that's his stand. I want to win. I want an opportunity to win.
Buster, I did one of their games recently, and he said, "My goal every day is to win tonight." That's all he ever thinks about. And when anyone else in the organization is thinking, well, we have to think about next year and the year after, that just doesn't jive with the manager, nor should it on many days. The goal is to win tonight and win as many games as you can this year, and then figure out next year. And I think that's a slightly different philosophy than some other people in the front office.
Yeah, I think that the self-examination in the Red Sox organization needs to take place in the offseason, has to be with the team's leadership about contracts. Look, we know, and I had a conversation with someone recently there, basically how the perception of the Red Sox has changed completely since they traded Mookie Betts. That, this organization ownership that had won 4 titles in, 20 years or 18 years at that time, totally changed when they traded Mookie. And I feel like every time we see one of these massive contracts, like with Julio Rodriguez, it shows that the Red Sox are completely out of step in their thinking with the market realities. When you think about, what they essentially were telling fans, look, Mookie Betts was way too expensive for us, a top 10 player, a homegrown guy, great guy. We know everything about him, but we can't pay him what he's looking for. Tim, when you factor in deferred money with the Mookie Betts contract, the deal that he signed with the Dodgers, he's making about $26 million a year, okay, in that contract. What the Yankees, as we talked about, offered Aaron Judge was $30.5 million. Mike Trout got $36 million. We're seeing these other whopper contracts. The Red Sox, as a big market team, need to adjust their thinking upward if they have any chance, I think, in signing Rafael Devers and changing the way that a lot of not only their fans, but I think people within the organization are thinking about how their willingness to pay.
Right. And let's face it, with Mookie Betts, they simply did not get enough in return, at least early on here. There's no way around that. Now, we never, ever evaluate a trade until maybe 2, 3, 5 years later, but it hasn't worked out the way the Red Sox had thought. And if they're not going to re-sign Rafael Devers, 25-year-old with that kind of track record and that kind of future, then I think the questions are going to get even more aimed at the Red Sox. What are you doing here? Who are you going to sign if you're not going to sign Mookie Betts, if you're going to potentially let Xander Bogaerts get away, and you're going to let Rafael Devers get away? Who are you going to sign?
What do you think of the news that minor leaguers are going to unionize, with the Players Association helping to facilitate that? I want to make it clear to everybody, the Major League Baseball Players Association will not be giving equal representation to minor leaguers. They do the big leaguers. They don't have to blow up the current CBA or anything like that. But for the first time, it feels like we're seeing the Players Association advocating strongly for the minor leagues. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think it has to be done.
Yep.
Buster, I covered minor league baseball 79, 80 and an A-ball team, and I could not believe the conditions that those players played under. And here it is, 43 years later, and it's still just not right that the minor leaguers are over there and the big leaguers are over there, and there's no connection. And the minute they get called up, everything changes. Well, it shouldn't be that way. They should have rights right now. They should have a better connection to the union right now. So I think this is a great move. We'll see how this works out, exactly what this leads to, but this has to be done in my mind, because minor league players are, for the most part, not taken care of properly when it comes to, especially when it comes to salary. It's unbelievable how little a minor league baseball player makes. So let's get them unionized, let's get them together, and let's get them closer to the big leaguers.
I remember it was about a decade ago. I was talking with one of my Vanderbilt guys after he had played his first couple of years in pro ball. And I said, how did you find it? And he said, I can't tell you how disappointed I am. He'd come from a program where there was a lot of focus on the players and trying to make them better, on trying to help them. And he said, it's like being thrown into the deep end of a pool. Now, you and I will agree that in the last decade, since I had that conversation, the way teams have helped players with nutrition, in some cases with salary, has really improved. But there's a lot of work to be done. I totally agree with you. I covered the Nashville Sounds in 1989, 1990. Boy, to see that some of the compensation for players hasn't advanced that much since then is shocking to me.
Right.
And I'm glad. Go ahead.
And you're right. Baseball is trying to make things better, but you're right. They need to try harder than this, and maybe getting everyone together like this is another big step forward.
All right, Tim. Thanks for doing this. Always great to talk with you, and I can't wait to see that lightning in your hair. I'm kind of becoming Cardinals fan today.
All right, Buster. Thank you. See ya.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.